the buildup, the anticipation, man, it was palpable. I couldn't wait. After the Steelers won in Denver, the AFC Championship game, to punch their ticket to Detroit for Super Bowl 40, those 2 weeks in between felt like an eternity. But now here it is. As I'm recounting all this, 20 years have gone by. I mean, does it make any sense? It doesn't, because when you know that you're this close as a lifelong fan to having the opportunity to taste a victory, whether it's a World Series, NBA Finals, or in my case, a Super Bowl, of course, you're counting the days, hours, and even seconds to get to around 6:30 p.m. kickoff for where the Steelers would have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. And obviously there was a lot that was leading up to that when I think back on that week where a lot of the back and forth where Joey Porter struck again based on some comments that the tight end of the Seattle Seahawks, Jeremy Stevens, once said. I think he called the Steeler defense, I don't want to say overrated, or I don't want to say to the extent where they're not that good, but he had some barbs for Joey Porter and company, and maybe it wasn't directed at him, but when you're knocking the defense or taking a shot at it, you know the first man, line of defense, is going to be none other than Peasy, Joey Porter. So here he was. He had to throw another shot across the bow by him saying that Jeremy Stevens is soft. And Stevens was a tight end, obviously not a Pro Bowl or even, dare I say, an all-pro tight end, but he was a guy that was part of that offense with Matt Hasselbeck as the quarterback, with Sean Alexander, who I believe was the league MVP that year, had a ton of touchdowns and a bunch of yardage on the ground. And they had Darrell Jackson, who I believe was their number 2 receiver. But anyway, Jeremy Stevens was a guy that you wouldn't really pay attention to, or maybe have a defensive coordinator stay up at night to try to stop that guy. But because the salvo was shot from his end over to Pittsburgh, Joey Porter had to come out and retort, saying how soft he was and saying that, he's a bit player. He ain't nothing to fear, so on and so forth. And of course, I'm paraphrasing all this. So now as we get ready for Super Bowl week, we get to the weekend, and of course the plan is to go back to Blondie's, where we were the first 3 times for the wild card divisional round and obviously the AFC Championship game. So now we're getting ready for Super Bowl. It's a Sunday, and throughout this whole time, unexpectedly and rather surprisingly, that my father, if you've watched the other 3 episodes, obviously there's a theme here, but for him to say after the Steelers won in Denver that he was going to come on down and he was actually going to bring wings and bring some beer and do a little pregame before 6:30, because as you know, the Super Bowl is an event. It's all day. It's not a thing where you can just roll up and all of a sudden get ready to eat and chow down. This was almost like a job. We were standing full attention to make sure that whatever beer, whatever food was going to be well into our system so we could just get ready to cheer this Steeler team on. And as it was a cloudy day. It wasn't really that cold. I'll never forget the date. At the time is this going to be released on the channel, which would be Super Bowl Sunday, February the 8th, which happens to be my brother Ruben, who was part of the Indianapolis crowd back in 2005. Shout out to you, Ruben. Happy birthday. Love you, my bro. But on that day, it was a little bit blustery, gray, no precipitation, thank God. And I'll never forget, we were outside right in front of Blondie's. My father got a parking spot right across the street, and he had a big tray of wings as well as Heineken's in the cooler. And we happened to be with the guys, G-Money, Walt, my guy Clarence, as well as Moss. And here we are outside, braving a little bit of the chill, but pounding down beers and eating wings, and people walking by us and say, hey, you shouldn't be drinking that out there, there's cops. Meanwhile, we were in the presence of New York's finest, so obviously we were cool. And that was the lead-in to the game. And it was great to know that my father came through with the promise of him bringing some food and some beer to get ourselves liquored up and obviously satiated to get ready for the main course, which was Super Bowl 40 in Detroit. And obviously it was a meaningful one for Jerome Bettis, who is from Detroit, went to school at Notre Dame, and I'm sure you know by now the videos of the team when they flew from Pittsburgh to Detroit, how they all wore Jerome Bettis's number 6 jersey in green, and obviously it was a very touching tribute to a man who had been in the league at that point, I believe 12 years, and knowing that this could have been his last go-around. And sure enough, it was a tribute to every man on that team to show Jerome the love that he deserved, knowing that this could be not only the last one, but to want to ride off as a champion. And as it was during the pregame introductions, the Super Bowl 40, so they had all the old MVPs come out, and as the Steelers are coming out of the tunnel, and they were actually the home team, but considering they won all those games on the road, they wore the road whites. That was a year where you would think that they would go wear the famed black jersey, but they said, we're sticking with superstition. We're not going to upset the apple cart. So they wore the road uniforms despite the fact they were the home team. Now, as it was when Bettis came out of the tunnel and he was the only one to go out there, and I believe Joey Porter was the one that said, Jerome, lead us out there. And as he runs out and he turns around, and even though he's yelling and all in a crazy, just focused state, I'm sure he's probably thinking, hey guys, I thought you were gonna follow behind me. But I'll never forget, and watching the NFL films afterwards, and to this day, those 3 words ring so true. As a lifelong Steeler fan, and it had been 26 years up until that point from the last time they won a Super Bowl. Obviously, I didn't find this out till later on because, of course, I wasn't in Detroit. I wasn't on the field. But just to have NFL Films, the masterful job that they do, to have the microphone right around that huddle for Joey Porter to come out and say this.
This is it! This is it!
This is it! This is it! That's how I felt. And I could have heard that however many miles away from the Motor City to the Big Apple, because I knew as a fan, not knowing if we were going to get back there. And I understand that this was year 2 of Ben Roethlisberger, and obviously he didn't have a crystal ball to see how many more Super Bowls he'd play in, but to me, this was it. Hopefully this was the moment that the Steelers would deliver, considering the trajectory and how everything has planned out and mapped out and have just been unfurled right in front of our eyes over the previous, really 4 weeks, but the previous 3 rounds. I just knew that this game could be just the ultimate. Not only just in a victory, but hopefully in a win that had just a bunch of great plays and great defense, tackling, etc., to the point where you knew deep down inside that the Steelers were the better team. But unfortunately, this is where the air comes out of the balloon, because this game was anything but a great Super Bowl. It wasn't even a good Super Bowl. In fact, a lot of it falls on the shoulders of the referee, Bill Levy, because people outside of Pittsburgh looked at this official to say he was the one that wrecked the game. Now, of course, can't just pin it all on him. He has a crew that's working with him. But there were several calls in the game that certainly went the Steelers' way that were dubious at best. Now, nobody could tell me about the pass interference that was on Darrell Jackson, who pushed off, I believe it was Chris Hope in the end zone, which looked like a touchdown for the Seattle Seahawks, but obviously that was not the case. But the Steelers, to me, it had to be all nerves, especially when it comes to the quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger. He did not have a great game. In fact, they had opportunities early on. Now, they went 3 and out, I believe, the first 3 series, and then they actually took a shot to where the Steelers looked like they were starting to mount some momentum, got a couple of first downs, and then taking that big shot, he sailed the pass high to where the defensive back, Michael Boulware, intercepted it, and I understand it was more of a punt than a pick, but it certainly thwarted whatever the Steelers' offensive game plan was going to be for that drive. And mind you, the Seahawks got off to a 3-0 lead early, so all right, hopefully the offense will start to wake up at some point. And then, of course, you had the play there in the end zone, which would have been 10-0, but obviously was negated. And I believe the field goal, because they were actually within striking distance, whether they were in the red or outside of the 20, I believe they missed a field goal. So what would have been a 6-0 lead was still 3-0. So now the Steelers finally went to work a little bit. And even then, it seemed like it was a slog. Just trying to get first downs, moving the chains. It was very uninspiring. It was almost as if, wait a minute, where was this offense in the second half that we saw against the Bengals? Or throughout the first half and most of the game in Indianapolis? Or even in Denver in that first half where they were able to move the ball and they put up 24 points on the Broncos right before the half. That offense was out to lunch. Or maybe they were on an early vacation. Or maybe they thought, well, hey, all we got to do is just show up and we'll just go ahead and win the game just by rote. And that wasn't the case. The Seahawks were obviously a very good team. They were the 1 seed in the NFC, had home field, and obviously were worthy of a team that could have won a Super Bowl. But as the Steelers were slowly but surely trying to get down the field, and it came a point where it was a 3rd and 28, despite the fact that they were in Seahawk territory. But really, the Steelers offense on this day, at this Super Bowl, there were just 3 plays. This was one of them. 3rd and 28, you're thinking, all right, maybe they could get a pass where they could cut that yardage from the point of 3rd and 28 to maybe 4th and 14 or 4th and 10, so they could have a setup for a field goal for their place kicker, Jeff Reed. And Reed was a very steady kicker, very reliable, solid kicker. And because it was at Ford Field, where it was indoors, controlled climate, we felt that, all right, if he was going to hit one from 47 or hit one from 45 or even less than that, then you know what? 3-3, we'll settle for it. But at the same time, Seattle was playing pretty well. They were moving the ball. Not that they were doing anything dominant, but their offense was a lot more efficient than the Steelers were. And it was a situation where, all right, if we can get maybe even a field goal, fantastic. But this one play where Ben Roethlisberger, as much as he is able to extend plays, slip and move, goes out to the left, and then for whatever the reason, he stops and throws what looked like a pass that I think is just starting to come down now. But it happened to fall into the arms of Hines Ward right there at the shadow of the goal line. And it was crazy because it's not as if he hit Ward in stride. It was almost as if Ward was an outfielder trying to catch a pop-up. And he was just sitting there, just waiting for the ball to land. And it was almost as if he was trying to draw the ball to him as fast as possible, considering that the Seahawks and their defensive backs were certainly zoning in on Hines Ward to either intercept, bat the ball, or maybe for him to even take a big shot. And as it was, he caught the ball and took a shot in the process. But a 3rd and 28 ended up being a 1st and goal. So now the Steelers are in business, and you can only hope that they punch it in. And they had to take a couple of shots before I believe they got to 3rd down, where Ben Roethlisberger, reminiscent to the play in Denver when he rolled out left, dove into the end zone to punctuate that game at 27-17 to make it 34-17. Well, they pretty much tried to do the same play, and it looked like he got through. It looked like, all right, yeah, they signaled touchdown. All right, Steelers take the lead. Not so fast. As they look at the replay to review it, and you look and you say, oh man, that is, I don't know. And I got news for you. To this day, it's tough. I understand there has to be conclusive evidence for them to overturn that. And as it was, as maybe by the hair of Ben Roethlisberger's beard, because he let it grow out during that playoff run, for whatever the reason, they called it a touchdown after further review the play stood. So, all right, you're not going to take that score back. Steelers are up now 7-3, and of course you're feeling good about the team as they head into the half. But there was a part of me at the half thinking, well, all right. Obviously, Seattle's probably thinking, we feel good, we played well, we moved the ball, all right, we got a touchdown call back. Please, the Steelers, come on. They haven't shown any semblance of an offense or have any momentum throughout the game. And although the Seahawks had some good defensive players, but please, this was not the Legion of Boom that you would have seen with them about, what, a decade later. So now it's a situation where it's the second half and the Steelers get the ball. And on the second play of the second half, this is where play number 2 comes in. Because the Steelers had a running back not named Jerome Bettis, named Willie Parker, otherwise known as Fast Willie Parker, because of, yes, he was fast. And on the second play of the second half, at the Steelers 25-yard line, Ben hands it off, and then next thing you know, Willie Parker bursts through the hole and off to daylight, sprinting all the way to the end zone. Nobody could catch him. I know there was a last-ditch effort to see if they could get him down by the DB, but was not to be had, was not to be done, and Fast Willie Parker does a flip into the end zone, and just like that, a 7-3 score became 14-3. Now, I felt a little bit of relief. It was almost as if it was a cushion because, again, the offense did nothing in the first half other than that 3rd and 28 play, despite the fact they scored a touchdown. Questionable to say the least. But now a 14-3 lead, you're thinking, all right, let's see how the defense is going to play out, and hopefully that they can come in and do the job. But then now, here's where things really got crazy. So as the Seahawks, who were trying to march on down the field, and now they're starting to make some progress. Now they get to a point where they take a shot, not necessarily to the end zone, but certainly inside the 10, and they get a first down. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the pass was caught by Jeremy Stevens. But then, wait a second, there's a flag, a hold, I believe on the right tackle, who Clark Hagans, may he rest in peace, was trying to get around on the edge to the quarterback, Matt Hasselbeck. And listen, whenever an edge rusher comes off, and obviously a lot of his momentum is leaning forward, and it's a thing where he's pretty much going downhill, and when you have a guy that's 300 pounds on top of you, it's almost going to look like he's going to pull you down. And I'll be honest, that was a call that was borderline. It was questionable. If they didn't throw the flag, you could argue, and if they do throw the flag, in this case they did, then you could say, two. Obviously, if you're a Steelers fan, you're going to say it's not a flag. And if you're a Seahawks fan, what are you talking about? That's a blatant flag. They should have thrown that there. Well, that 1st and goal then became a situation where they had to push it 10 yards back. And then I believe a play or two later, Matt Hasselbeck, as he's trying to not necessarily go for the corner in the end zone, but trying to get a shot there where he thought he had a man wide open. And what happens? Picked off by Ike Taylor. So now it's a situation where the Steelers are going back the other way, and now you even feel even better about yourself because it's like, wow, now the Steelers are really cooking here, and maybe this could turn it around to where they can extend this lead and maybe put themselves in a position where they can rely on their defense. They don't have to rely on Ben Roethlisberger because up until that point, he was awful. And I believe on that drive after the interception, when the Steelers were going down the field and they turned the field over because now you're getting into the 4th quarter, and then Ben Roethlisberger, for whatever reason, or you know what, I take that back. I believe that was now late 3rd quarter, and that interception, my sequences is all, now it's becoming a little bit blurry. But I do know that Ike Taylor had that interception. And I want to say that that was a play in the game, was in the 4th quarter. Because before that, and this is the play I want to get to when it comes to Ben Roethlisberger not having the great game, as I mentioned earlier, he threw the interception to Michael Boulware, but now the Steelers are actually making some hay on offense, and now they're getting to a point where they're inside the 10-yard line. All right, well, what are they going to do here to the point where if they score, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, this is going to put them in a good position to extend the lead, and who knows, they could play downhill from there. But Ben throws this lazy pass that was intercepted. I could have intercepted it by Kelly Jennings, and I get it. He saw a little bit of a rush, had no zip on the ball. He got it away, just floated it away, and Kelly Jennings said, "Thank you very much," and raced the other way about 75 yards, which then led to the touchdown that they scored to make it 14-10. And now you're thinking, oh, geez, what's going to happen here? Now the momentum is certainly on the Seahawks side, and away we go. Now, as I'm starting to get my bearings and realize the sequences here, you have a situation where the Seahawks are now starting to mount a rally. And as they're moving on down the field, as I mentioned about that holding call, Clark Hagan's the right tackle. Now it's a situation where the Steelers have to come up with a big play. This is where Ike Taylor comes in to save the day. And now you breathe a sigh of relief. And I believe it was on that drive where the Steelers, all right, 1st down here, moving the ball, get past midfield. Now they're in Seahawks territory. This is where play number 3 came in. Remember the trickeration that you saw there against the Cincinnati Bengals when Antoine Randall got the ball and threw it over to the other side, Ben Roethlisberger, Cedric Wilson? Well, now this was another trick out of the offensive coordinator Ken Whisenhunt's bag, where they had a handoff to Willie Parker, reversed it over to Antoine Randall, which was actually a play that they did during the regular season. And Randall, who was a quarterback at Indiana of all places, and to think they just won a national championship. And as Randall's coming around, he throws it and finds Hines Ward there wide open, pretty much galloping into the end zone as he catches it on the fly. Couple of steps, high in the air, touchdown. Pittsburgh goes from 14-10 to 21-10. Now it's just a matter of making stops, and they did do so, and now it's a matter of moving the chains. And when Bill Cowher, the coach of the Steelers, said, Jerome, don't fumble the ball, because think back to the game against Indianapolis. Mind you, they weren't in a goal-to-goal situation, but now Jerome Bettis, who, let's face it, at this stage of his career, he was on his last legs. He had some productive runs throughout the playoffs, but certainly not the dominant Jerome Bettis that we had seen throughout the course of his Steeler career, where he was pounding out 8, 9, 10, 12, 14-yard rushes to where he would gain about 120, 130 yards. Very pedestrian in this game, and they didn't use him that much, but when they absolutely positively needed yards and needed to move the chains, they went to the bus. And that's what he provided. First down after first down, trying to wear that defense out, and they were able to move the ball, and then sure enough, the Steelers ate up enough time on the clock to where the Seahawks did get the ball last, but obviously they were down 2 scores. They were trying to do their best to see if they could get in the end zone, but time was starting to run out on them. And then on the very last offensive play by the Seattle Seahawks, Matt Hasselbeck was trying to find Jeremy Stevens right near the goal line, trying to make a last-ditch effort to get into the end zone to maybe have a couple of seconds on the clock, perhaps kick an onside kick, and therefore get the ball back to maybe kick a field goal to tie the game. Obviously, it was a tremendous long shot, and as Hasselbeck did throw to Stevens, he got walloped there right at the shadow of the goal line, to where both Joey Porter and James Farrier were taunting him, standing over him, who knows what was said, cursing at him, I'm sure saying all types of nasty comments. And it was a situation where they did get flagged. They got 15 yards, but at that point, the game was over. And the Steelers, I believe, took one snap, took a knee, and the next thing you know, the confetti's coming down. And me, at that point, despite the fact that it was a foregone conclusion, knowing that they were going to win after they got those first downs, and even with Seattle getting the ball, it was weird because, yes, was I happy on the inside knowing that they were going to win this game? And not to say that it had to be so riveting or compelling or had me at the edge of my seat or chewing on my fingernails. I mean, that's probably the last thing I'd want, because who knows? Any screw-up would have probably destroyed the chance of the Steelers winning a Super Bowl. So knowing that they had a comfortable lead and they didn't play great in the game, and Ben Roethlisberger, who I believe was, 9 for 21 or 23, 123 yards and 2 interceptions. Yeah, definitely not his best game, and it's going to go down as a Super Bowl win. But it was the worst performance by a starting quarterback in a Super Bowl win ever, and I don't even know if they'll ever be topped. Sorry, Ben, just got to call it like I see it. But knowing that when they took that knee, confetti, they're getting the stage ready to, of course, announce who the MVP is, the presentation of the Vince Lombardi Trophy. I'll never forget, I took a couple steps outside. I said a prayer, just thanking the football gods or the sports gods, who knows, and I actually shed a couple of tears. I did, because at that point, that's when it came to me. That's when it started to sink in. That everything that had happened when I was a 10-year-old boy and I was watching Super Bowl 14 in my living room in a Bronx apartment in the Northeast area, where from that point on, after Terry Bradshaw retired in his last game, which was played at Shea Stadium, my beloved baseball team, where they used to play. But between all the quarterbacks, whether your name was Todd Blackledge, Cliff Stout, Mark Malone, David Woodley, Bubby Brister, Neil O'Donnell, Cordell Stewart, Mike Tomczak, Kent Graham, I mean, the list goes on and on until we got Ben Roethlisberger in the 2004 draft. And then after a year in the league where he won 15 straight games and got us to an AFC championship, got the Steelers to an AFC championship game. And then the next year goes through Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Denver, to Detroit to win a Super Bowl. All those demons were exercised. Yes, all of them. That meant losing in Denver in 1990. And even before that, in Bradshaw's last playoff game at home against San Diego, San Diego, when they were up 28-17 and lost 31-28 to Dan Fouts. There, I believe that was in the 82 season. No, yes, I believe 82. Then you have losing in Denver in 90. You have losing in 92, Bill Cowher's first year, at home. Richard Shelton dropping that interception. Oh, man. When it was 7-3, and that touchdown in the next play iced the game for the Bills as they moved on to an AFC Championship game. The 4th and goal at the 7, Joe Montana in the AFC wildcard game at Arrowhead. 94, the Chargers. Need I say more? I made a vlog about it. It's on the channel. Definitely check it out. Losing Super Bowl 30 to the Cowboys. Losing in the fog up in Foxborough in 96. Losing at home to Denver in the AFC Championship game. Not making the playoffs for 2 straight years, even 3, even the 2000 year. 0-1 losing to the Patriots. 0-2 losing in Tennessee in the divisional round. 0-3 not making the playoffs. 0-4 losing to New England again. And now winning Super Bowl 40. All those demons were exercised. And it was a relief. It felt great. It was wonderful. Very anticlimactic, though. I cannot front. But you know what? You don't throw Super Bowl wins away. You keep them. You remember them. You cherish them. Speaking of cherish. So now I'm in Blondie's with my dad. Game's already over. Everything has been passed. The trophy, MVP, which went to Hines Ward, the wide receiver. And we're just standing there and we're just looking at each other, and we had a beer. And we actually had a nightcap at a bar in the Bronx on Castle Hill that I used to go to many years ago. And we even went there. I didn't get home till, I believe, after 1 a.m. That's how much I was basking in this. But I'll never forget, just like I did after they beat Denver, and even when they won the Super Bowl, and just enjoying this entire ride with him. And again, I remember thanking my dad. And of course, I love my dad. And it's a moment that I'll remember forever. Not just the Super Bowl, that whole run. And knowing that I didn't have that as a kid with him. And sometimes in the most peculiar situations or circumstances, whatever it may be, something magical like that pops up and you experience it. And it was one of those things that as long as I'll be a sports fan, as long as I'm alive and breathing on this planet, no matter if the Steelers do not win a Super Bowl or even don't go to the playoffs for as long as I'm alive, which I hope that's not the case, but I'll always remember that run. And to think, 20 years ago, Super Bowl 40, and here we are, Super Bowl 60. And that's a moment that I will never forget, or really moments, because it was not just the culmination of winning a Super Bowl, it was the ride, the magic carpet ride. And that's the one thing that's beautiful about sports, is when you least expect it. A team that had really, a lot of people didn't even think they were gonna get to a Super Bowl, considering that they were the first team ever in NFL history as a 6 seed, the lowest seed you could possibly be in a conference, to not only win three playoff games on the road, but also win a Super Bowl. And they have that distinction. And for Jerome Bettis, who goes off into the sunset, saying that the bus made its last stop in Detroit, and rightfully so, why would he want to come back after that, considering that his teammates had just coerced him to come back after losing the year before against New England in the championship game. But now, as he goes off into the sunset, and as the night was starting to dwindle down, and knowing that I had this incredible ride with my Steeler cronies and, of course, my dad, one thing that I'll cherish and remember forever is not only just that playoff run, but knowing that it was spent with him. And for that, Dad, 20 years later, not only do I thank you, but I love you dearly. Thank you so much for stopping by the channel and watching this video. I sincerely appreciate it. If you want to check out other Steeler content or just even other sports content, whether it's the shorts, whether it's podcasts, whether it's live streams, whether it's vlogs like this, please hit that subscribe button. This is made by a lifelong sports fan for you guys and gals, a sports fan. No clickbait, no rage bait, none of that nonsense. Just true, passionate, real sports talk, unlike any other. And until next time, on the flip.